Hello Africa, welcome to the AU Youth Corner podcasts from the Youth Division of the African Union Commission. My name is Amanda and I lead youth engagement at the AUC. In these series of conversations, I'm going to be speaking to some of my colleagues about their ideas, philosophies and work in the Youth Division of the African Union Commission.
Today, we're speaking to Ademola Adesina, who is the international expert in the Youth Division. And so, Ademola, we're going to ask you to tell us a bit about where you're from, who you are, what you've done up until now, and what you do in the Youth Division. And tell us a bit about being an international expert.
Well, I'm not sure about the international expert bit. I think it's just the title they give to me. So you do that when you employ someone and you want them to do everything. You give them a title that means nothing. And that's sort of what they've done to me in my role within the Youth Division. So in that context, they've asked me to do things around entrepreneurship development, around innovation, around partnerships, around evidence. So I generally work in those areas for the Youth Division. Before this, I've done quite a bit. I won't go into the details of all of that, but just to say that worked a little bit with the AU, UN, worked with a couple of tech companies, worked in digital marketing, worked in logistics. So it's a little bit of here and there. I think for me, I've always prioritized a little bit of everything. It helps with context, it helps with having a better view of issues and discussions, and I think that sort of permeated my entire life, and that is what has led me to this point where I sort of am doing quite a number of things, quite a number of different things.
Interesting. So would you say that you're a systems guy?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't look at myself as having thematic expertise. I go to places and people ask me, what's your background? That question throws me off. I don't have thematic expertise. I solve problems. If there's a problem in a specific instance, irrespective of the thing, I look for how to solve those problems.
That's very interesting. So this work that you do that spans so many things in the Youth Division. So you said you do evidence, entrepreneurship, partnerships. It's a loaded question, but how is this relevant for youth development on the continent? All of these things that you do. What does it do? How does it help?
So you've made an assumption that I'm doing it because it is relevant for youth development. Okay. I'm going to go with...
Is it relevant? Is it relevant for youth development?
No, I was saying that because it is relevant for youth development, but it's relevant for a lot of other things even beyond youth development. But because you sort of narrowed the lens towards youth development, I'm going to stick to that. Absolutely. Why is it relevant? I think it is a question that it's I feel like there's a bigger conversation around why is the AU relevant. Generally, and in my opinion, the AU is relevant for a couple of things. Number one, it's around peer-to-peer learning and exchange. If someone is doing something well, you should be able to learn from that person that is doing that thing well. Ideally, that is how we build knowledge. There's a sense of dialectics. Someone comes with a position, someone else comes with a counter position, and we look at, looking at both, this is what works. So taking that down to countries, if country A, for example, comes with a position, country B comes with a counter position, you can then say, okay, given the evidence, this is sort of what works. So that's one in terms of why the AU is useful. I think the AU is also useful around standards, creating standards where we get to a point where we say, okay, on this very basic issue, this is sort of the standard that sort of works. The third and sort of related to that is generally around exchange, just seeing what someone is doing, seeing what's how can we, if I go to a different country as an individual, if I go school in a different country as an individual, for example, like pick up cultures and systems from those countries. And I feel like the AU therefore sort of plays in that bit. The final one is around, being able to speak as one voice with the rest of the world. So I feel like that's why the AU is useful. Now, if you pan down and take it a lens down, why does everything I do, why does it matter within this context? I would say it's exactly for those 4 reasons. So from a youth development perspective, it's ensuring that we've got some bit of standards around what works, what does not work. We're able to exchange and, we're able to speak with one voice with the rest of the world. And we're able to define what sorts of, giving that entire idea around dialectics, define what's the better approach towards things. So from a high level, I think that's why the work that I do hopefully is important.
What are we doing right, and how can we improve on the things that we may not be getting right currently?
That's an interesting question. Just to say here, that Amanda promised me before this conversation started that I won't be losing my job. So I'm expected to be honest. So the question is essentially around, have you been successful? I would say that there are pockets of successes and there are quite honestly pockets of failure as well. I cannot, probably need a little bit of much more evidence to be able to put on a scale to say, are there more successes than failures? I feel like around success, we've been successful around, the conversation with speaking with the rest of the world, having some level of standards, some of the policy discussions that we have, to a large extent, there's been some level of success. And I often tell people that it might not look like it's one of the reasons why the AU continues to be relevant is because of this. If you look at the rest of the world, a lot of the things that, a lot of the models that the rest of the world often use from a policy multilateral point of view, a lot of them have either been developed in Africa or have been tested in Africa in a way that they've not been done with the rest of the world. So whether it's the SDGs or whatever, you would see that to a large extent, the initial thinking and the initial experimentation often comes from Africa. And I think that's great. And I think that we often forget that. So I think that's interesting. The second thing I often tell people, I remember I went to some events, someone was asking why it's taking forever to negotiate this, the African CFTA. And I was saying, do you know how difficult it is to have 55 people to agree to something, irrespective of what it is? And we're speaking about 55 countries with different histories, different contexts, different languages. So in that context, I think the EU has been very successful. In terms of failure, I think that a lot of, I don't think it's even if the failures are unique to the African Union. And when I say the African Union, I often feel like I'm speaking about a larger topic. I feel like you want to drag me to the work I do on a day-to-day basis. But I feel like
I'm not trying to I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to understand, because you drew a very interesting parallel between where the AU sits and the AU's objectives and ours. I mean, I say our because I also work in the youth division, and our own objectives and what we're trying to achieve. I think it was, and I think, yeah, surprise. And I think it was a very interesting parallel, and I think it was a correct parallel. So I think it gives insight if you can speak to what can we do better? How can we do, especially, okay, let me bring it down to the context of young people in Africa who make up 75% anyway, so majority of the population. How can we do better? Knowing what we know about some of our challenges, what are some of the things that we ought to be focusing on?
Okay, so how can we do better? Look, I feel like there are a couple of things that we can do better with that. So one of the things that I think is sort of going back to the previous question, and then I'll come back to this, around failure, is the constitution of the institutions that we work within. And themselves makes it difficult. So some of these models were built in the post-World War era, to be honest. The entire discussion around multilateralism sort of was, as it's currently structured, was built in 1940s after the World War. And some of those models may not necessarily be as relevant. So going back to the specific questions around what we can do better, I think we need some level of agility within the way that we work. We need to be a little bit more agile around methods, around systems. I feel like we also chase shiny objects. We do a lot of chasing shiny objects. I often laugh about it because a lot of these things are the spaces within areas where I work. So 6-8 years ago, it was women empowerment. All the money was going to that. Everyone started going to that. 4-5 years ago, it's entrepreneurship development. Everyone's rushed to that.
And then we had this moment also that everyone flocked to as well.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. Today it's innovation. And these are areas where I work in. Today it's innovation, and everyone is organizing an innovation challenge, and there's a hackathon here and there. And I often ask people, I would like to see models that have worked for these things that we've chased, even though we've committed millions and billions of dollars into some of these things. Well, can we quantify some of the successes? I often say, for example, that I want to see a successful hackathon in Africa. And hackathon, we don't quite know about hackathon, everybody's doing hackathon. I want to see one that has led to a product that has led to changing social behavior or, increasing incomes or whatever it is. Yeah, so while we chase agility, I think it's important to be clear around what kind of agility we're chasing, essentially. So it isn't just doing the shiny thing, but being very clear around what kind of things we are doing. Which then leads me to the final point around evidence. Everybody says it, we all know it in Africa, we sort of are shooting in the blind. So we're just doing things because they sound nice, and there isn't a lot of evidence that is tied into the way we engage. So what I would like to see differently from that perspective is, to question some of these things. If someone comes to you and says, let's organize a hackathon, I do this, and Amanda knows. My first question often is why? Why should we organize a hackathon? Because someone else is doing it is not a good enough reason. Because it looks shiny, it's not a good enough reason. What sort of impact do we hope to get from that?
And I really wish we had all the time to explore this. I think we need a separate conversation for this. And you raised something that already came to my mind, around context. And I think one of the biggest strides we can take is understanding our context and who we are and what we're able to do, and not just chase things because this looks nice and this is what other people are doing and we're grappling for visibility. So it's a very, very important conversation. And I really like the overarching takeaway that yes, agility, but agility with focus and in what context. Thank you very much, Ademola. We're going to have a quick fire round, so this is usually just like a minute. I'm going to ask you questions and you just answer like in a sentence, or even less, in phrases if possible. And I will try to not follow up, but if you say something very outrageous, I'm going to have to follow up. Are you ready? Ready?
Let's do this.
All right, let's do it. First of all, how would you explain your job to a 5-year-old?
I help others. I help institutions grow Africa.
That's a 4-syllable.
This is hard. This is hard.
Are you
the system
5-year-old from your job?
Well, I mean, there's this saying about if you can't explain to a 5-year-old, you probably don't know what you do. So maybe I actually do.
You probably don't know. So, what's the most rewarding part of your job in one sentence?
Seeing change.
What's the most surprising thing about working with young people? What surprises you the most?
I'm not positive and negative. I don't know which one I should go for. I'll go for the positive.
Positively.
And I'm speaking to Gen Z's, they're amazing guys. These guys are amazing. I think it's the area for us. I love it.
So the positive thing is Gen Z. What's the negative surprise?
Oh, you said you do follow-ups. Okay. So the negative will be sometimes you feel like there's some sense of entitlement. You just want people to do things for you. Sometimes you need to. People will do things for you, but sometimes you need to do things for yourself as well.
What are you currently reading?
Interesting. I'm reading a book called How the World Thinks. It's by someone called Julian Baggini or something like that. And it's a history of philosophy that sort of contextualizes Western philosophy, which we all grew up with and learned in school, with Asian philosophy. Essentially saying, we think of Asian philosophy as a little bit more religious, but some of the things they spoke about from a historical point of view were similar to what these guys in Western traditions spoke about as well.
So we're going to put the title of the book in the description. So we're asking Julian to call us about sponsorship opportunities at the African Union. So finally, what are those 3-4 things that you were going to say in our interview? What are those things that you want to say to young people? I mean, our question is what's one thing, but you can put 1A, 1B, 1C. To young people out there, they're just trying to make their way through life, trying to get things done. What are you saying to them?
I think that every major generation creates their own world, and I feel like there's expectation that the guys that went before us should create the world for us, and we see that they failed at that. So the one thing I would say to young people is, be bold and courageous to create a world that works for you.
Wow. Thank you very much. I had a follow-up, but we're way over time. I think we need to share part 2 of this conversation, Ademola. Thank you so much for being such an engaging guest on this podcast. And thank you to all colleagues who made this possible, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.